Chapter 6. Finally! Chung Myeong leaned against the stick he was using as his cane. Finally, the magnificent Mount Hua laid before his eyes. Finally! Tears flowed freely. How hard was it to get here? He brushed shoulders with death so many times and arrived using a child's body. No different from an ordinary, no, less than an ordinary person's body. Of course, it wasn't anything people usually didn't face on their travels, mostly starvation and exhaustion. But that was dangerous too, right? After his terrible ordeals, Chung Myeong had finally reached Mount Hua. Finally. If he wrote down his hardships, it would become a hero's epic, or a beggar's epic. Of course, Chung Myeong couldn't ignore the wear and tear on his body. Although he had accumulated ki, the energy that should have been used to develop his body was spent walking and running. His body had not gotten stronger at all. The constant grating of his bones made Chung Myeong grimace in pain. Even his already ragged clothes had been reduced to scraps on his body, and the dust stuck to them. But that wasn't important. Chung Myeong had reached Mount Hua. I'll smash the head of anyone who says being reborn will grant a wonderful life. Who you were reborn as was important. If he was reborn as a beggar without parents or a temple to take him in, he'd rather not be reincarnated. But the suffering ends now. He'd finally reached Mount Hua, so now he would see with his own eyes what the hell happened to Mount Hua. Let's go. Chung Myeong vigorously pushed on his stick and started climbing Mount Hua. After a while, Chung Myeong, clinging to the cliff slopes, heaved like his lungs were going to burst. What test was this? On this mountain? On this all-important mountain, did it make sense for the path to be like this? He could remember the Shaolin and Wudang sect paths overflowing with incense, but he couldn't see a single person visiting Mount Hua. Chung Myeong stared mournfully downwards. Endless cliffs stretched before his sight. Was that an exaggeration? Obviously. Nothing was endless, but he was above the clouds. This crazy mountain was so tall, he had passed the clouds and he still had to walk. This wasn't a road anymore. If this was a road, then the sparrow was a phoenix. Can you call it a road if you can't plant both feet on the ground and have to scrabble forward on your hands and knees? Damn it! What were they thinking building the sect on top of this mountain? Chung Myeong wanted to run up and investigate as soon as he had reached Mount Hua, but it didn't seem like he'd get the chance. Sahyung, isn't Mount Hua such an auspicious place? Isn't that peak over there shaped like a sword? It seemed like the sect established itself in a good place. Shit. Damn it. What sword-like peaks? Very sword-like, indeed. The paths to the sect cut his feet like swords. It was said that Mount Hua was the steepest of the 5 mountains. It was only when he could not use martial arts that Chung Myeong really understood. I'm really going to die. It wasn't a joke. He was fully convinced his life was at risk. His limbs were already trembling, and he had such a long way to go. And seeing how empty it was, he understood just how badly Mount Hua had suffered. Chung Myeong groaned and propped himself against the wall. But he couldn't give up. What was the point if he gave up all the way? If there's a mountain, it's a man's job to climb it. Climb it and rise again with the persistence and courage. The truth was, going down was more dangerous. Really? Moments later, a hand clawed at the top of the cliff's edge. The dusty white fingertips were frail, yet they lifted the rest of his body. I'm going to die. Chung Myeong flopped onto his back, having barely managed to lift his body up. I almost fell. He could see the clouds he'd put far below him. Coming this far as a child deserved a compliment from himself. It didn't go easily. It really didn't go easily. The good news was he didn't have to go down the mountain. All that was left was finding the sect. Let's see. Chung Myeong struggled to his feet and looked around. That way, in front of him, was a road leading towards the summit. From a little way along the road, he could see Mount Hua. Chung Myeong's small legs pumped. His heart shook. After 100 years, he finally returned to Mount Hua. Of course, it's only been a month since I got here. But let's use 100 years because it sounds cooler. Climbing the hill wasn't difficult at all. His body was completely exhausted, but the thought of reaching Mount Hua gave him strength. Ah, the sight of the roof tiles of the main gate filled his eyes with sentiment. River and mountains had changed, but these tiles didn't. The gentle curve still captured the spirit of Mount Hua. Right on those old tiles. Huh? Old? A tile was missing. Chung Myeong rubbed his eyes. Was he mistaken? No matter how much he rubbed, the scenery didn't change. With each step closer, the half-destroyed gate became clearer and clearer. Chung Myeong ground to a halt. The main gate was the first thing visitors visit. Even if the interior was damaged, the front gate was always kept grand and neat. But this was the gate of Mount Hua. Its frugal and pragmatic construction exuded the atmosphere of Mount Hua, and it was at least kept neat. But what am I looking at? The tiles were scattered here and there and graffitied all over. They needed to be replaced, and badly. But the cracked, blackened, unpainted pillars were even more horrifying. Spiderwebs? They had to be removed frequently, so he could understand that. However, it was impossible to understand why they were left where they were so visible. And the fire dragon point? Where did the sign go? The signboard? Where did it go? Didn't the signboard symbolize the sect itself? Where the hell did it go? This gate did not read Great Mount Hua Sect. That was the signboard Sahyong cleaned every morning. Where did it go? Where? Chung Myeong's legs lost strength. He barely staggered to the main gate, but he had no words left.
From what I know, they're in ruins.
Mount Hua Sect. I think I've heard of it. Weren't they famous in the past? From what I heard, they slew the heavenly demon and then collapsed. Are they still there?
Ruined? Mount Hua? Chung Myeong's eyes shook. No, what kind of dog shit is this? Others may despair, but Chung Myeong struggled to contain his growing irritation. Mount Hua. Mount Hua destroyed. Damn it, not something else but Mount Hua? Mount Hua? Oh, my Mount Hua is ruined. Mount Hua. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't deny reality. Chung Myeong, battered and shaken, finally had to admit it. Changmyeon Sahyong, why did this happen? Why? Why did this happen at all? Ugh, the suffocating silence. Ugh! Mount Hua could actually be destroyed? No matter what he had heard on the way here, he didn't hear a single thing about Mount Hua. He occasionally heard about Wudang, Shaolin, and even the smaller sects, but not a single word about Mount Hua. This is why I told you to act in moderation, Sahyong.
Yeah, you bastard. Mount Hua is a sect. What is the meaning of warriors stuck in the mountains, prettying themselves up and acting like big people? Those who ignore the difficulties of others have no right to speak about their troubles.
Even then, you should have held back. The elders and disciples, and even the other great disciples, were all killed in that battle. Numerous sects said they had sent their very best, but there was no sect as invested as Mount Hua. The elders who were supposed to lead the sect died, and the disciples who were supposed to succeed them died. All that remained were the youngest disciples who had much to learn and hadn't even mastered the martial arts. Who, then, was supposed to carry the name of the great Mount Hua? Right. He could feel his hopes shatter. He could feel it crumbling like the front gate. Mount Hua was destroyed. Sahyong, this is why I said that. Didn't I tell you nothing would be left if we blindly followed the rules of the sect? Do you see what happened? How can you face the rest of the sect in the underworld? Oh, you frustrating man! Chung Myeong's resentment echoed across the empty mountain. This is crazy. He returned to life after 100 years and found Mount Hua ruined. He fought to protect this, but if this was the result, what were they fighting for? Really? He felt the despair creeping over him. It was then, who's there? A voice